Talking free agency predictions here on this edition of NFL Daily, powered by Chat Sports. Tyler Jones here with you. Appreciate you joining us. On today's show, I got 5 of the top free agents in the 2024 class, and we're going to tell you where they think they end up, whether it's with the team they're currently on or somewhere else. I'll explain why in just a matter of moments. Before we do, a little challenge out there from the bosses. They want to know, can we get 20 subscribers off of today's video? Here at NFL Daily, we are your off-season headquarters as we're talking all things draft, free agency, trades, and more, bringing you daily coverage here on the channel. We're live twice a week as well. If you are a diehard NFL fan, this is the channel for you. Subscribe now for free. Lock us in and never miss a moment here on NFL Daily, powered by Chat Sports. Subscribe now. You'd be glad you did. Let's start with Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs. Chris Jones missed week 1 with a holdout and then ultimately came back and was dynamic this year for the Kansas City Chiefs and a huge difference maker for Kansas City from the moment that he returned to this Chiefs defense in 2023. The Chiefs head into this offseason with a pretty good position when it comes to cap space. And the Chiefs should be able to afford to actually keep Chris Jones, coming off a total of 3 Super Bowls that he's been a part of in Kansas City. I don't see any reason why he would leave the Kansas City Chiefs. He wants to be there. They want him there, and they have the money to be able to do so to keep him for the long term. I'm looking at probably about a 3-year deal for Chris Jones to remain with the Chiefs. You look at that offense with Mahomes and Kelsey on one side. Chris Jones is the anchor that holds up that defense on the other side. And to think about this, too, when it comes to Chris Jones, there's not an obvious replacement for him. It would be one thing if they had another guy lined up to step in place to be the heir apparent to Chris Jones, but they just simply don't do that in Kansas City. Right? Don't have that right now. Chris Jones, we mentioned, a 3-time Super Bowl champion, right in the thick of the prime of his career right now. A first-team All-Pro selection for the second time in his career this past season. 5-time Pro Bowler as well. And you better believe this guy is going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer when he wraps it up someday. So let's ask you in our pinned comment today, will Chris Jones return to the Kansas City Chiefs or not? Weigh in. Tell us what you think. Y for yes, in for no. If Chris Jones is coming back to Kansas City or not, tell me what you think. Today's show is sponsored by PrizePicks. PrizePicks, the place to go for daily fantasy made easy. Here's how it works. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Promo code CLNS for a $100 deposit match on your first entry. You choose 2 or more players on any given category. You get the choice of more or less. Today, with the Great American Race, the Daytona 500 going on from Daytona International Speedway this afternoon, we're doing a little NASCAR prize picks for you. Got Tyler Reddick to have more than 20.5 fantasy points. Bubba Wallace to have more than 45.5 fantasy points. If both those hit, we're turning $20 into $60. And by the time you're watching this, hopefully somebody hasn't wrecked out at this point. But nonetheless, play along with us. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Promo code CLNS for a $100 deposit match. The link is in the comments and description of today's video. PrizePicks, proud partner of NFL Daily by Chat Sports. Glad to have them on board here on today's show. Let's talk quarterback now, and that is where we find Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins has had a very good career to this point, but the Vikings have been in an interesting position with him. It's them asking themselves, is Kirk Cousins good enough to pay the money that he commands of a top-flight quarterback in this league? And we saw last year when he went down, the Vikings got some good quarterback play for a bit out of Josh Dobbs, and you look at the money that he would require, they could certainly use that money elsewhere. And with him getting older, is it time for them to start considering a younger quarterback? For me, I think it's best if these two sides move on. If the Vikings hit the reset button on the quarterback position, go younger, save that money, and spend it elsewhere. And for Kirk Cousins, he needs a fresh start. I think a team like the Atlanta Falcons, who believes they're just a quarterback away, that has a new head coach in Raheem Morris coming in, he could be a good fit for Atlanta, and that's where I see him ultimately going. And if you recall, he began his career with the Washington Commanders, Spent 5 seasons there, and they didn't give him the big deal either. They let him go in free agency, ends up in Minnesota after that, and he's had a solid career, 4 Pro Bowls as recently as 2022, but coming off that Achilles injury and getting older, you have to wonder if Kirk Cousins is ever going to be the same quarterback that he once was, or if it's a downward spiral from here. If you're the Minnesota Vikings, I think this is the perfect timing to move on and go get that young quarterback. Where will Cousins play in 2024? Is it back in Minnesota? Is it Atlanta? Or is it somewhere else? Give us your predictions here on NFL Daily where you think Kirk Cousins is going to go. Let's talk receiver now. T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals, the most coveted prize at the receiver position this go-round in free agency. And Higgins coming off a down year this year where he suffered some injuries and wasn't the same player we're used to seeing. Joe Burrow, of course, was hurt, and so that affected his performance as well. You look at the Bengals, they're not in a great position when it comes to cap space and trying to be able to keep players like T. Higgins. I think for now, though, he stays in Cincinnati. I think they're going to put the franchise tag on T. Higgins and kind of kick the can down the road, potentially towards next season to try to figure out a long-term contract potentially. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals team with Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon and company. They're trying to take advantage of this window that they have right now with this talent. And I think that the Bengals will do everything they can to at least keep T. Higgins around for this upcoming season. And he's been consistent. 4 straight seasons with at least 656 yards and 5 touchdowns. Did have that hamstring injury that kept him out of 5 games this season, but if he were to hit the open market, if he can't get a deal done, or if they decide to franchise tag and trade him, you better believe there'll be a lot of teams interested in T. Higgins' services. Next on our list, we find Josh Allen, the edge rusher from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And you look at Josh Allen, this is a guy that's coming off the best season of his career with that Jacksonville Jaguars team. And now you look at the Jags going forward. They have some tough decisions to make because you got to pay Trevor Lawrence here pretty soon, and among other guys. And Josh Allen, I think, is ultimately going to be a casualty of the cap issues there with Jacksonville long term. I think that they're going to move on. There was already discussions over the last year or so about potentially trading him. I think I look at a team that's looking to make a splash on defense that has a ton of money to spend. The Washington Commanders seem like a natural fit to sign Josh Allen. And you look at Washington. You moved on from Chase Young. You moved on from Montez Sweat, but you didn't really replace those guys. You bring in Josh Allen into the fold here, and all of a sudden you're looking at adding one of the best pass rushers in football, and it doesn't feel quite as bad losing Sweat as well as Chase Young if you bring Josh Allen into the fold. This past year had 17.5 sacks, which was a Jags franchise record and also a career high for the 2-time Pro Bowler, including this past season, he was named a Pro Bowler for the former first-round pick out of Kentucky. Get him to Washington, and that could be a huge relief for that Washington team as they move forward from here and try to get this team on the right track. We got one more player to get to in a moment, but first, who's the player that you want your favorite team to sign in free agency? We're talking plenty of guys here, but there's a lot of others out there as well. Give me a name that you'd like to see in your favorite team this free agency period in the comment section below. Last but not least on our list, we find Brian Burns, the star edge rusher from the Carolina Panthers. And with Brian Burns, it's pretty fascinating. This is somebody that the trade offers have been very high for him. At one point, there was rumblings that the Rams were willing to give up 2 first-round picks to bring him in. The Carolina Panthers and him aren't really on the same timeline. Brian Burns is just now entering the prime of his career, while the Carolina Panthers are at the bottom of the barrel of the National Football League. Whether it's a franchise tag and trade situation or they let him walk away, it's hard to imagine that Brian Burns is a part of the long-term plans of the Panthers of getting the most out of him while the Panthers can be competitive. Team to watch for me is the LA Rams, that same team that tried to trade for him before. Obviously, they like him, and they're in a pretty good cap situation, the LA Rams are, and this is a team that's trying to maximize on the moment, right? Matt Stafford, he's getting older. Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, those guys are getting older. Heck, even Sean McVay. We don't know how much longer he is going to coach. He's talked about stepping away in the past. So bringing in Brian Burns for one last go-round to kind of run it with these guys makes a ton of sense if you're the Los Angeles Rams. Burns, a two-time Pro Bowler. He's been very consistent throughout his career. 5 straight seasons with at least 7.5 sacks for the former first-round pick out of Florida State. The Rams make a ton of sense to me as far as that goes. So there you have it. Those are some of our free agency predictions for 2024. Thanks for joining us here on this edition of NFL Daily. Subscribe now for free for the latest happenings all offseason long right here on the channel. We'll see you next time.